Someone who understands the political and social fallout of the Dobbs ruling better than anyone is House Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi. She was first elected to the House when Roe v. Wade had been the law of the land for 14 years. So it's safe to say that in her 30-plus years in the House, she didn't imagine she would be rounding out her incredible career in a country where a woman's right to choose was stripped away. I spent some time with her this week to discuss our post-Roe reality and much more. So we're sitting here 1 year after a decision that impacted millions of Americans across the country. And in your briefing just after the Dobbs decision was handed down, you said, quote, "Be aware of this. The Republicans are plotting a nationwide abortion ban. They cannot be allowed to have a majority in Congress to do that." Now, we've seen the response from the American public since then, but how concerned are you if Republicans regain the Senate, the White House, that they would push through an abortion ban?
Well, I feel quite certain that they would. I have to make sure that they don't win the House, and that I'll work with our leader, Hakeem Jeffries, to make sure that doesn't happen. And I feel that it's definitely within grasp. Everybody said we were going to lose 30, 40 seats. Last time we lost 5. And everybody said, you had the wrong message. They were saying to me, you're going to owe an apology to the members because Dobbs is in the rearview mirror. But it wasn't. It was up front, right up in front for women in our country. We lost 5, not 30 or 40. But we didn't want to lose those 5. So we'll get them back.
Now, there's a lot of language being thrown out there by Republicans running for president about their plans on abortion. And I think it's so important for people to understand what they're actually saying. So Governor Ron DeSantis signed into law in the dark of night, as we all saw, or we didn't see, a 6-week abortion ban. Is that essentially a ban on abortion, given most women don't know that they're pregnant at that point in time?
Well, it is. I don't think we should get involved in dates and all of this. But if you take total ban, restrictions of that kind and the rest, many states in our country will have a very unhealthy situation for women. In addition to which, the members here, only a handful of them voted to enable women to travel to seek reproductive health care. So it's a disrespect for women. It's a right of privacy. It is a precedent of the court. And what the court did 1 year ago was something that reversed what has been happening in our country. Since the beginning of our country, our founders founded on freedom and democracy. Our founding document, of course, the Declaration was very clear in that regard, but the Constitution was not in terms of equality and the rest, but in their wisdom, they made it amendable, starting with the Bill of Rights, African-American men getting the right to vote, later than women getting the right to vote, one thing and another, Roe v. Wade, and then marriage equality, and then a reversal. Our country has always been about expanding freedom until now. This court, ignoring its own precedent and the right of privacy in the Constitution. So we have to reverse that, and Congress has the right to do that one way or another. And people have to know what is at stake in the election.
Donald Trump is taking credit for the Dobbs decision many times, even recently posting, quote, "I was able to kill Roe v. Wade much to the shock of everyone." Is this something you think Democrats should be hanging around his neck more?
Yeah, because first of all, it's an hypocrisy of the first order, but without going into his, shall we say, inconsistencies, to use a gentler word. Yeah, that's what he's saying, and I think that has clarity. And there are people in our country, and I respect their view on the issue of a woman's right to abortion. But these same people in the Congress, 8 of them voted for women having the right to contraception. 8. I think it was just 3 maybe or so voted for women to be able to travel to have access to reproductive health. So make no mistake, there is clarity on their side on this issue. And it is wrong, but it's red meat to their base.
I want to talk about the Supreme Court, because this week ProPublica is out with a new report about Justice Alito failing to disclose gifts, including a luxury trip with a billionaire donor with business before the Supreme Court. This is after the reporting we've seen surrounding Justice Thomas and his wife, and you've been quite outspoken about the fact that there's no ethics requirements, essentially, not a baseline of that. There's also a new Quinnipiac poll that shows public approval of the court has dropped to 30%, which is shockingly low, an all-time low. Are you concerned the Supreme Court has lost its legitimacy?
Well, I think they have the opportunity to write some ethics rules for themselves. And that's what the Chief Justice has said. We can do it ourselves. I see no action being taken there, but nonetheless, that's what they have said. But I give credit to Senator Whitehouse because with the majority in the Senate, he is able in his committee to point out what needs to be done to have integrity on the court. Integrity on the court. It's shameful how Justice Thomas and Justice Alito have been so cavalier about their violations of what would be expected of a justice of the Supreme Court. Here we have a body chosen for life, never have to run for office, nominated, confirmed for life, with no accountability for their ethics behavior. 30% seems high.
Do you think that there should be changes, reforms to the Supreme Court, term limits, an expansion?
Yeah, I don't know about the expansion. I mean, it's been over 150 years since we've had an expansion of the court. It was in the time of Lincoln that it went up to 9. So the subject of whether that should happen is a discussion. And it's not a rallying cry, but it's a discussion. The president formed a commission. They did not recommend expansion of the court. That shouldn't be the end of it. But there certainly should be term limits. There certainly be term limits. And if nothing else, there should be some ethical rules that would be followed. I had one justice tell me he thought the other justices were people of integrity, like a Clarence Thomas. I'm like, get out of here.
There's no question it has been a historic week in Russia, but it has not exactly been quiet here at home, where we saw our political discourse deteriorate in stunning new ways. Take what played out this week in the Republican-led House of Representatives. Republicans voted Wednesday to censure Congressman Adam Schiff for investigating Donald Trump. They also tried to recast the Russia probe as the so-called hoax that Trump has long claimed. But their hearing with Special Counsel John Durham fell woefully flat. Then we saw Congresswoman Lauren Boebert baselessly try to impeach President Biden, which led to a verbal altercation with Marjorie Taylor Greene, who was apparently jealous that she wasn't leading the charge. You can't make it up sometimes. Greene then teamed up with Republican caucus chair Elise Stefanik to co-sponsor a bill that, quote, expunge Donald Trump's 2 impeachments. I shouldn't have to say this, but Congress can't erase impeachment proceedings after they've happened. All of that sums up the GOP agenda in a nutshell. Rather than use their majority to actually govern, the Republican caucus is waging a campaign of retribution, relitigating a laundry list of grievances in an effort to vindicate Donald Trump. As Nancy Pelosi puts it, it's a puppet show. I asked her about it during our conversation earlier this week. We're sitting right here in the Capitol building, and over the last week, we've seen the hearing with John Durham, Republicans trying to force a vote to impeach Biden, the vote to censure Congressman Adam Schiff. Do you anticipate that Donald Trump is going to keep driving the agenda of the Republican-led House?
It appears so, because the fact is that when we had this vote, was it a week ago, it lost the vote to censure Adam Schiff. The word is, and I don't know because I'm less person to speak about what goes on among the Republicans, but the word is Donald Trump forces weighed in, and now the vote changed because they're protecting the unpatriotic, unscrupulous behavior of Donald Trump.
Now, you are known for many, many things. One of them is being an excellent vote counter.
Yeah.
Do you think Kevin McCarthy will be Speaker at the end of the year?
But let me just say this. One thing I am is strategic. And when I'm strategic, you have to know what you're talking about. I have no idea what goes on in their caucus, but I do know one thing. In January of 2025, Hakeem Jeffries will be Speaker of the House.
So Donald Trump, as we know, was just indicted and pleaded not guilty to 37 federal counts involving the retention of classified documents, obstructing justice, and making false statements. What was your reaction when you read that indictment?
Well, you know, I have 30 years of experience in intelligence.
Longest serving.
Longest serving. And the only leader that anybody can remember in recent or even near history that came to leadership with a national security credential. Came from Ways and Means or agriculture or transportation. I came from an intelligence standpoint, as well as appropriations that related to our national security. So I had 30 years, and I know how important it is to protect these documents. If I were in the SCIF, that's the room that you go in to get briefed, and I just wrote down a few names or a few dates, I couldn't take my own piece of paper out of the room.
With the names and dates on it?
With the names and dates. I'd have to submit it to the staff to be placed in a vault. I would have access to my information, but I could not take it with me. This is about protecting our national security. It's about protecting our sources and methods. And not only that, as allies. What is an ally? A person who helps you, right? Instead, we are jeopardizing not only our own security, but the security of other countries and their sources and methods. How do they trust us as an ally if we do that? So what the former president is alleged to do, and he seems to have confessed to it, but nonetheless he's innocent until proven guilty, is to say he did it and have some arrogance about it. And if that is the case, he seriously jeopardized our national security, if he did that. And secondly, he is dishonoring our court system in the manner in which he is treating it. So our security and one of the pillars of our democracy, very casual about it all, sad to say.
As you just alluded to, I mean, reading the itemized list of 31 documents and the clearance levels, as a former ranking member on the Intel Committee, there were Five Eyes classifications there. There were some of the highest level classifications. And knowing what you know about former President Donald Trump, we know he has an affection for dictators. Do you have concern, without us knowing at this point, of what he may have wanted to do with those documents?
No, I don't know. But what I do know is that he seriously jeopardized our national security. And the other piece of that in terms of him is he himself, when he was a candidate, talked about how important it was to protect our documents, our security documents. Our intelligence community takes risks for us all the time. And to jeopardize their lives, their families, the sources they may have interacted with is a very dangerous thing, very irresponsible. And by his own public statements, before he was president and as president, he knew that.
You've been incredibly outspoken. You were here on January 6th. You played a leading role on January 6th. You've been a strong defender, of course, supporter of the work of the January 6th committee. And this week, the Washington Post was out with a report detailing how senior leadership at DOJ resisted investigating Trump's role on January 6th for more than a year. According to the Post, quote, a wariness about appearing partisan, institutional caution, and clashes over how much evidence was sufficient to investigate the actions of Trump and those around him all contributed to the slow pace. Do you think that the Justice Department waited too long in order to move forward with investigating Trump?
I can't really speak to that because all I know about it is what you just described. That was in a public account. I do think that right now, my first question when I saw that article was, but right now, they are proceeding. And I understand the sensitivity to a president who has incited an insurrection. They were going to put a bullet in my head, hang the vice president of the United States. They made an assault on our democracy, on our Constitution, and the rest. And that has to be investigated because you just can't do that. And you can't arrest people for doing it while ignoring the big fish who instigated it, if, in fact, they have the intent to take the case to that point.
You frequently quote Benjamin Franklin's, "A republic if you can keep it."
Yeah.
If Donald Trump wins re-election, do you think we can keep it?
I never thought he would win the first time, so I hesitate to say there's no way he could win again. But here's a president who has been twice impeached, multi-times indicted. We don't know how many it'll be. Defeated once. I think he's very seriously damaged goods. So we have to do everything to make sure that a person so frivolous with our democracy, so jeopardizing of our national security, so disrespectful of our rule of law would ever be a president of the United States once again.
A special thanks to Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi for spending some time with me earlier this week. That does it for me today.